Cucks? It's time for episode 1 of season 2, motherfucks. That's right. The return of the hater, season 2 up in this bitch. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the WWE Draft, all right? Coincidentally, it just so happens that WWE decided to start their season when I started my season up in this bitch. I'm not saying they copied me, but let's be real, you know what I'm saying? Now, as is customary, they had a draft to begin the new season of SmackDown and Raw. Now, a lot of times these drafts are very interesting, or at least to me, they're very interesting because they are indicative of who will get pushed, right? And who will get a nice revitalization to their career by switching shows or whatever the case may be, right? Now, you have to judge a draft based on the last draft, right? So we have to look at who was drafted first or second in the last draft, or who was drafted high up and whatever, right? So who had high expectations and where they ended up in this year's draft, right? And also you have to see how the draft just shakes things up. Now we're going to talk about the draft, we're going to go down the list basically, right? I guess we'll start with the Friday part because that was first chronologically, you know what I'm saying? So the Friday night, the way the draft was constructed was there were two pools of superstars, right? Some that were eligible to be drafted on Friday and some that were eligible to be drafted on Monday, right? I don't know how I feel about this. It kind of has this WWE-ness to it, if you will, where they don't really want to put anything over more than they should, right? So it's kind of like WrestleMania. It's like 2 nights, or there's 2 main events. So it's like, did AJ Styles really main event WrestleMania or did he not? You know what I mean? They create more opportunities for people, right? So now there's multiple first round picks, right? Because obviously someone might pick someone from the other pool first if they had the opportunity to pick from both pools, right? But nonetheless, it was what it was. The Friday night one was kind of, it was presented as if it was going to be the more interesting one because it had the WWE champion and the Universal champion. But if you really think about it, it's like Raw gets the first pick, right? So they're going to pick their champion, and then SmackDown's going to pick the other champion. You know what I mean? So there's really nothing special going on there. You know what I mean? They made it seem as if it was just you have to tune in to see what's happening type of situation, but it really wasn't. You know what I mean? So with that being said, the first round, Raw selected Drew McIntyre, and SmackDown took Roman Reigns. Now, here's the problem with this. First of all, Roman Reigns is obviously the better of the 2 main eventers, right? So Roman Reigns should have gone first. I understand they want to keep him on SmackDown, but a way to do that would have just been to give SmackDown the first pick. This is an opportunity to highlight who the number 1 person in your company is completely. And it's not Drew McIntyre, it's Roman Reigns, let's be real, right? But that's neither here nor there. This was a waste of part of the round because we all know that the champions have to be prioritized, right? So someone has to pick one champion, the other one has to pick the other champion, and that's what happened. Next up, Raw picked Asuka. This makes sense, Aside from Ronda Rousey, Asuka has been the most consistent woman in the last few years in WWE. So it makes sense that she'd be picked up pretty early. And considering that WWE really prioritizes women's wrestling now, this pick made sense. SmackDown took Seth Rollins, right? This was one of the only picks that SmackDown got that improved their show. You know what I'm saying? As usual, typically what happens is Raw just takes everyone good from SmackDown and then just deposits a bunch of losers to SmackDown who have to now get over on SmackDown in hopes of getting picked up by Raw in the next year. You know what I'm saying? But once in a while, SmackDown will take a good person. They always give him 1 or 2 good people. And Seth Rollins is that guy. Let's be real, right? Next up, Raw selected the Hurt Business, right? Which is cool because they got all 4 of them, including Lashley, who is the United States champion, which means that the U.S. title stays on Raw. This makes sense. The mid-card belts and the championship belts should be prioritized. You know what I mean? They should be prioritized within the context of the show, right? The show should be interested in keeping their champions, right? And more importantly, keeping the championship, right? There's been entire storylines that have been written around that premise, right? So you've had when the Shield was feuding over the title, it coincided with the brand split and the draft, and there was a triple threat match, and the winner, it happened to be Dean Ambrose. He ended up on SmackDown. That was a huge deal because he was drafted to SmackDown, right? So the winner of that match would take the title, and then that's when we had the Universal title be introduced eventually, right? So there you have it, motherfucks. That's very important. So it makes sense that the Hurt Business would be taken because you have 4 stars, right? I mean, let's be real, you have Bobby Lashley and MVP bring something to the table, but it's a faction right? And it's a title, so it makes sense. Round 2, Raw takes AJ Styles, right? That's a good one. I've been waiting for AJ Styles to go back to Raw, where he belongs, right? Because I want AJ Styles to be the WWE champion again, and I want him to be the champion on Raw. I don't want him to be the champion on SmackDown. That doesn't really count. You have to be the champion on Raw for it to count, in my opinion, right? SmackDown takes Sasha Banks. This is one of the first ridiculous picks, right? Like, I understand in the draft, you have to do some ridiculous picks to just kind of put over the idea that somehow these people are important. But there are several people, right? Like, as far as I'm concerned, round 2 is just stupid, right? You have AJ Styles, and then SmackDown takes Sasha Banks. Raw takes Naomi, a round 2 pick. Naomi should be like on the supplemental draft, you know? She's lucky she's not getting shipped back to NXT like Ember Moon, you know what I'm saying? But Naomi gets picked up. Then SmackDown takes Bianca Belair, which is a ridiculous waste. She's accomplished absolutely nothing on Raw, so it is what it is, right? And then Raw then picks up the Women's Tag Team Champions. Now, think about that. The Women's Tag Team Champions are Shayna Baszler, who was in one of the main events at WrestleMania, and Nia Jax, who has been presented as a main event type wrestler for quite some time. You get 2 for the price of 1, right? And you get the Women's Tag Team Championships with it. So why the hell would anyone pick, fine, you can pick Sasha Banks because she's like a big deal. But why the hell would anyone pick Naomi or Bianca Belair over the Tag Team Champions, right? As a matter of fact, when Sasha Banks was, I think she was in that Elimination Chamber match, I could be wrong, right? Didn't Shayna Baszler just choke her out in like 10 seconds? You know what I mean? So like, why the hell would Sasha Banks go up higher than honestly, either Nia Jax or Shayna Baszler? But it is what it is, right? That's at least a bit understandable. But to suggest that Naomi and Bianca Belair should rank up so high is just preposterous. Like, Naomi will probably have like 3 or 4 matches on TV, but she's like on the same level as Dana Brooke. You know what I mean? She's not a round 2 pick. And this is explained much further on when we see round 3. Ricochet. I don't like the kid, but who would you rather watch, honestly? Ricochet or Naomi? Like, who would you rather watch? Obviously Ricochet, right? Then they pick Jey Uso. Now, Jey Uso, all right, he's being pushed to the main event, and there's a possibility that he might become the champion, at least in terms of kayfabe. So you would want to draft Jey Uso really, really quickly, right? Think about that for a second. You know what I'm saying? Just think about that for a second. You know, if Raw were to take Jey Uso, they could just draft him, you know, like, let's say they take Jey Uso instead of Naomi, right? They draft him just to have the guy that might become the next champion, you know? That would make sense kayfabe-wise. But as we've seen, somehow Naomi ranks higher than Jey Uso. Then we have Mandy Rose, a complete waste of a pick as well. And then SmackDown picks Dominic and Rey Mysterio. Dominic and Rey Mysterio, first of all, the fact that you get 2 for 1 is huge, right? You get Rey Mysterio, which is a legend, right? And these people, Dominic and Rey Mysterio, have been pretty much keeping Raw afloat the last, like, few months, right? They're the only thing interesting on Raw. Them and Seth Rollins. Nobody cares about Randy Orton versus Drew McIntyre for the 19th time, right? The only reason to watch Raw is to see Dominic and Rey Mysterio. And they get drafted in round 3. Again, after Naomi, Bianca Belair, and Mandy Rose. It is what it is. Same thing. Raw takes Miz and John Morrison. Miz and John Morrison are 100% going to be used more on Raw than Naomi is. Mark my words, right? It's just foolish. Then we have round 4, where probably the most ridiculous thing is happening here. Number 1, Raw selects the SmackDown Tag Team Champions, Kofi Kingston and Xavier Wood. Now, this makes sense because they won the match and then they were selected, right? So it's like, oh shit, they're champions now. Let's take them away, right? Since presumably Nakamura and Cesaro weren't in this pool, so you couldn't draft them, right? So you're like, oh, now Kofi and Xavier are the champions. Let's take them when we can. But the question becomes, in what world, right, would Kofi and Xavier Woods and Big E, if you want to count him too, ever be drafted lower than Ricochet or Naomi? Like, the New Day, right, should be a round 1 pick. I don't like the New Day very much, but the implication that somehow the New Day is 3 rounds below the Hurt Business is ridiculous. The New Day is like the most decorated tag team at this point in the history of tag teams. They have Kofi Kingston, who is a world champion and like a multiple-time mid-card champion. They have Big E, who is doing this huge singles run. And they have Xavier Woods. In what world, like, think about it. Who would you rather want if you were doing like a fantasy booking, right? If you had to, like, play your friend in like SmackDown versus Raw, right? Who would you rather pick? The New Day or Naomi? Are you kidding me? This is absurd. To suggest that Naomi somehow is more interesting and will be featured more prominently than the New Day is ridiculous. Now, furthermore, here's an inconsistency in the draft. SmackDown chose Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods. The rules of the draft dictate that if you want, you can select part of a group or part of a tag team if you want to exclude the other part, right? So, for some reason, Raw decided that taking Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods is better than taking both of them and Big E as well, right? They decided to break up the New Day, essentially. Raw, USA Network, or whatever it is now, Fox Network, who the fuck, controls Raw. They decided that it's better to just fracture the New Day, right? Which, okay, fine. You can make the argument, it's like, yo, we don't want Big E, we think he sucks, right? We just want these two guys, and we want to see what they're capable of doing, right? But then, SmackDown selects Big E. Now, think about that for a second. Right? SmackDown selects Big E. Why would SmackDown waste a draft pick to pick up Big E? Right? Think about it logically. If Raw had the opportunity to take all three and decided to choose only two of them, the suggestion would be that Raw has absolutely zero interest in Big E because they could have gotten him for free without wasting a draft pick. So, knowing this now, logically, the SmackDown executives would never ever draft Big E. They'd be like, oh, okay, we can pick him up in the end. In like on the wire, we can pick them up afterwards. But because there's no logic and nobody thinks these things through, right? Like nobody sat down and thought this through, right? Like they had SmackDown take Big E next. If you wanted to do it this way, and I understand they were going for that moment of New Day splitting up. If you wanted to do it that way, what would happen is this: Raw or SmackDown selects Big E first, right? Big E is clearly the one with the biggest upside right now. He's the one that's being pushed as a single star, right? They select Big E, the argument being that we want to separate Big E from the New Day so he can be a serious competitor. And then, now that New Day is available, right, the other show selects New Day. You see what I'm saying? They're like, oh shit, well we still have Kofi and Xavier, so let's take them while we have the chance, right? We can't take Big E, but we can take Kofi and Xavier, right? That would have actually made some sense. But to pluck out Kofi and Xavier and just say, we want these two guys, like we basically want the jobbers, right? But we don't want the one guy that might be a main eventer one day. And then the other side is like, okay, they don't want him, we'll take him. It should be the exact opposite. If you're doing like a fantasy draft with your friends and someone's like, man, I don't want this guy ever, you don't waste your first pick picking that guy, right? Nonetheless, the bigger transgression here, the bigger sin here is the fact that New Day has been relegated to a round 4 pick. This is ridiculous. Again, I've been talking shit about the New Day. I'm not a huge fan, but let's call it like it is, motherfuckers. You know what I'm saying? Like, they were drafted in the last round of one of the drafts. Last round. Below people like Mandy Rose, below people like Ricochet, below Jey Uso. Like, you can make an actual argument that beyond the world champions, like beyond, what's it called? Like beyond Drew McIntyre, Roman Reigns, and maybe Asuka, and maybe Seth Rollins, that the New Day should be like the next pick, right? Like, I would put them above AJ Styles. I would put them above the Hurt Business. I would put them above Naomi and Bianca Belair because you get 3 of them. In this case, you get the tag team championships, and you get Kofi Kingston, who was one of the biggest stars in the last, 2 years, right? He was one of the guys that was pushed the most. But fine, you might even get them after AJ Styles and after the Hurt Business, which is doing very well right now. But after Sasha Banks, who has achieved basically nothing, after Naomi, who has achieved nothing, after Bianca Belair, who has been at best a detriment to Raw. Like, I change the channel when I see Bianca Belair. I used to think she was going to be a big star. Not anymore. Now she's done nothing, It is what it is. Then they had round 5, apparently, on WWE Talking Smack, where Raw picked up Humberto Carrillo, SmackDown got Murphy, Raw got Tucker, SmackDown got Kalisto, and Raw got Drew Gulak. Now, none of these people will ever amount to anything. I've been saying it for years, right? They keep pushing Murphy on me as like a big deal. Like, Murphy is a perfect example of these people that in the last draft, Murphy was drafted pretty high up, right? He was drafted pretty high up with like people like Aleister Black and Humberto Carrillo and Angel Garza. I tried to, not Angel Garza, but Andrade, right? I tried to say it then. The implication that Humberto Carrillo should be drafted on TV and not on Talking Smack last year is ridiculous, man. You can just look at him and you can be like, this guy will never amount to anything. He is on the same level as Kalisto. I've been saying this for months. If you don't believe me, go back to my videos. I mention it all the time. I say Humberto Carrillo and Kalisto are like on the same level. And finally, WWE acknowledges this by having them both be featured in round 5, the round of jobbers, right? Humberto Carrillo on Raw, Kalisto on SmackDown. Now, before we move on to the other part of the draft, let's also keep in mind the fact that the only things that have changed here, basically, right, are that pretty much Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods are now on Raw. Miz and Morrison are now on Raw. Dominic and Rey are on SmackDown. And that's about it. Nothing else has changed. Everything else has remained the same. You know what I mean? Those are the only... And Seth Rollins. I forgot about Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins and AJ Styles, right? Everyone else has stayed where they're supposed to stay. And SmackDown has only received Seth Rollins, and in my opinion, a good pick, Dominic and Rey Mysterio. But beyond that, they've achieved nothing else. You know what I'm saying? SmackDown is just... They gave up AJ Styles. They gave up, like Kofi Kingston and Xavier. All these other things. For the most part, though, like in the first round, for example, aside from Seth Rollins, there is no actual change, right? Everyone stayed where they're supposed to stay. The drafts back in the day used to be interesting because you'd see things like, okay, this guy who was like the #1 contender on SmackDown is now moving to Raw. Like when Kurt Angle moved from SmackDown to Raw, or Batista, who was the world champion, would move from Raw to SmackDown, right? Or people like Christian or Booker T, people that were like huge stars, but were right there at the cusp, would now switch shows in hopes of continuing their push, right? Now it's just a bunch of people that have to essentially reinvent themselves, but it is what it is. Now let's get to the Monday Night Raw portion of the draft. For some reason, night 2, they had a WWE Network exclusive announcement, it says here. I didn't see this part. But Raw picked up Grand Metalik and Lince Dorado, right? Who cares? No one cares about that at all. But I guess they're a tag team now. And SmackDown picked up Shorty G. I'm unclear as to what this means. I guess these were people in the first part of the draft that didn't get picked up, and now they're picked up, right? I remember when Shorty G was supposed to be like a quasi-big deal, you know? When he was like, oh, I'm going to take the nickname of Shorty G because I'm short and I like it, or some horseshit like that. It is what it is. Now we have round 1 of the we might call it the main draft, right? Even though it doesn't have the champions, it's the main draft because it's the one on Raw. So there's more people, right? So there's more... You know, like being #1 in this draft is more interesting than being #1 in the smaller draft. So Raw, with their first pick, they picked The Fiend Bray Wyatt. Why they picked The Fiend Bray Wyatt, I don't know. Raw had the opportunity to get the first pick, get Roman Reigns, the guy that destroyed Bray Wyatt, that didn't give a rat's ass that Bray Wyatt wears a mask, kicked him in the balls, and hit a spear on Braun Strowman, right? As far as I'm concerned, a lot of these people that Raw got, even though Raw poached a lot of people from SmackDown, the facts are what the facts are. They poached a lot of broken characters, like Bray Wyatt, who's a loser. Like, all this guy does is lose. He went to SmackDown, got his ass kicked by Goldberg. He got his ass kicked by Roman Reigns, who's like the new Goldberg. Right? He sucks. He's a piece of shit. So next up, SmackDown takes Bayley. This makes sense. Bayley is not only the SmackDown Women's Champion, but she's also like the longest reigning champion in WWE right now. So it makes sense. They already got Sasha, so take Bayley. With the winner of that becomes your champion. Who cares? Raw takes Randy Orton, and here's where I have a problem, motherfucks. Obviously, common sense dictates that Bayley's great, a great pick, but to take her before Randy Orton is ridiculous. Randy Orton should be the first pick. Randy Orton is probably going to be the next champion, and he should be the first pick because he's Randy Orton. The end, motherfucks. So, SmackDown then takes the Raw Tag Team Champions, the Street Profits. Somehow, the Street Profits are now a round 1 pick. SmackDown has pretty much wasted its pick with the Street Profits. Now, the only logic behind this, the only way that this makes sense, is that SmackDown, because their tag team champions have been poached by Raw, they needed the new tag team they needed the Raw tag team champions to come over to their show. That makes sense on a kayfabe level, right? And justifies why the Street Profits are so high up in the draft, despite the fact that not only are they complete jobbers, right? But no one in the world would suggest that the Street Profits are a bigger draw or are better in any way, shape, or form than Kofi and Xavier, right? So it's like Kofi and Xavier are around 5 or 4 pick, right? Last round pick. And the Street Profits are around 1 pick. Now, Street Profits, kayfabe-wise, have been successful. They've been champions for a long time. You know, they've been champions for, God, I don't even know how long. Like, before WrestleMania, by a few months, I think. And they've been champions for, like, 8 months. Who the fuck knows? But the point I'm trying to make is that what appears to be an inconsistency here actually makes sense, right? Raw takes Charlotte Flair, makes sense too. You know, let's be real, she's like a perpetual star. She's obviously, like, aside from Becky Lynch now, unfortunately, Charlotte is by far the one that's most likely to main event WrestleMania again. Like, she's the one that's actually a star. So it makes sense that she'd be picked up so so early, despite not being a champion, right? Round 2, Braun Strowman gets picked up. I don't know why. Once again, Braun Strowman will always be remembered, in my opinion, for being a guy that got drowned in a swamp by Bray Wyatt and then got speared by a serious wrestler, Roman Reigns, right? And lost as a result. And now has to go to Raw and pretty much like he has like this cuck gimmick now, right? He's basically on Raw trying to hurt people because he's upset that he got his ass beat on SmackDown, right? It's like, oh, I can't compete against Roman Reigns. I'm too weak. I'm too beta of a human to compete against Roman Reigns. So I have to go on Raw and just be angry, right? Just another angry guy. You know, it's really stupid if you ask me, but it is what it is. They got Braun Strowman. SmackDown got Daniel Bryan, who for some reason perpetually gets ranked as a high-ranked like wrestler, despite the fact that he hasn't been around for like a year, right? And despite the fact that he's been pretty uneventful in this last run since he came back, you know. So it is what it is. Raw takes Matt Riddle. This is a solid pick. Matt Riddle, there's a huge upside for Matt Riddle, and he should be a round 2 pick, right? Then we have SmackDown picking Kevin Owens, motherfuckers. Kevin Owens, another solid mid-carder to balance out the loss of Matt Riddle, right? Raw takes Jeff Hardy. Jeff Hardy is by far, out of everyone thus far, except for Randy Orton, of course, he is by far the person most likely to be champion again. Let's be real, right? People might say it's The Fiend, but it's not. Jeff Hardy is actually a popular wrestler. A wrestler that is a legend, and a wrestler that probably draws substantially more than Bray Wyatt and everybody else here except for Randy Orton combined, and maybe Charlotte, right? Next up, here's where it gets stupid. Retribution gets picked up by Raw in round 3. Now, here's the problem with that. Number 1, Retribution is something that you don't want on your show, presumably, right? Because they're here to destroy your company. So you want the other side to pick them up, right? You want SmackDown to get Retribution. But for some reason, they get drafted. Not only do they get drafted, but they get drafted above like everyone else, basically, right? You mean to tell me that Retribution is like less of a force than Street Profits? Come on, man. You know, I get it. It's a bunch of jobbers with stupid names, right? Like Teabag and Mace and Reckoning or T-Bar, whatever the hell it is. I'll just call him Teabag from now on. And Mustafa Ali, who is a perpetual jobber. I get that, you know? But still, they should be drafted either higher to give them a push or not at all to suggest that nobody wants them, right? Now, I'm going to do a little mini rant about Retribution at the end of this video, so stay tuned for that, motherfucks. Next up, we have SmackDown picking up Lars Sullivan. This makes sense. Lars Sullivan came in. He looked sloppy as ever. I mean, physically sloppy. This guy's just like, he's like a bag of milk. It's so weird, right? But he came out. He beat the shit out of John Morrison. And The Miz, like, ran away from him, right? He's been beating the shit out of people, right? He should be this high up on the draft. Now, of course, this guy has Ezekiel Jackson written all over him. Like, he's never going to be a star. Let's be real, man. They've given this guy so many opportunities. But he could be a nice Umaga or a nice Rusev. Not as good as Rusev, but he could be a nice that guy, right? He could be a nice U.S. champion who at some point goes to WrestleMania and wrestles a big match against, let's say, like a Cena or something like that. Loses or wins that match, who cares, right? And then goes into oblivion, just spirals downward completely, and ends up on AEW as SARS Mullivan or whatever. You know what I'm saying? This guy's never going to be champion. He's never going to be the big star that Vince wants. He doesn't have what it takes. He's a big, strong guy, right? But again, so was Ezekiel Jackson. So was Umaga. So was Vladimir Kozlov. So was Snitsky. This guy has Snitsky written all over him. Remember Snitsky, motherfucks? Except Snitsky was actually interesting because he had a gimmick, and Snitsky looked like a beast. He was like 6'8" and just looked like he was jacked. He was like 350. This guy's like supposedly 330, but I don't really buy it, to be honest. And he has a stupid beard now, and then like people found him doing like gay porn or something. So like this guy is never gonna make it. Let's be real, right? Next up we have Keith Lee. For some reason, Keith Lee seems less desirable than Lars Sullivan. This is the strangest thing, right? In what world is Keith Lee less desirable than Lars Sullivan? As a matter of fact, in what world is Keith Lee less desirable than a lot of these people, right? I would take Keith Lee over The Fiend. I would take Keith Lee over Daniel Bryan, or over Matt Riddle, or over Kevin Owens, or even, maybe not Jeff Hardy, but that's about it, you know? Certainly would take him over Lars Sullivan. Next up, King Corbin is selected by SmackDown. And thus far, aside from The Fiend changing from SmackDown to Raw, that's the only thing that's changed, right? And the Street Profits, but who cares? You know, that's it. The Fiend and Braun Strowman, everybody else is pretty much staying where they are. People like Matt Riddle don't really count, in my opinion, because he just debuted like a few weeks ago, basically a few months ago. So who cares? And Jeff Hardy goes to Raw as well. Next, Raw takes Alexa Bliss. And round 4, it's Elias. And then SmackDown Intercontinental Champion Sami Zayn, right, somehow gets drafted after people like Jeff Hardy, right? People that he beat for the title, essentially. Not essentially. People that he beat for the title, right? Somehow, he is drafted after Jeff Hardy, even though he is the champion. This makes absolutely no sense. You know what I'm saying? He's the champ, and he gets drafted after these jabrones. But it is what it is. And also, forget about the fact that he beat them. He's also the Intercontinental Champion. This should be like one of the first picks, right? Like, what would you rather have on your show? The IC title or Kevin Owens? What would you rather have? I mean, this makes absolutely no sense to me, but it is what it is. They take Sami Zayn. Raw takes Lacey Evans. Who cares? SmackDown keeps Nakamura and Cesaro, and Raw takes Sheamus. Hopefully this means something for Sheamus. Round 5. Raw takes Nikki Cross. SmackDown takes Ziggler and Rude, who were just traded into Raw like last week or whatever for absolutely nothing, for some bullshit. Dolph Ziggler just got like a title shot and that's it. Raw takes R-Truth, who obviously should be drafted way higher than everyone here, right? R-Truth is a first-round pick. Let's be real, right? He's more entertaining than Braun Strowman ever will be, so it is what it is. SmackDown takes Apollo Crews, and Raw takes Dabba-Kato. Who the hell cares about Dabba-Kato? No one. Anyways, Raw takes Titus. SmackDown takes Carmella, even though she was hyped up as being this big deal. Raw takes Peyton Royce. SmackDown takes Aleister Black. And Raw takes Akira Tozawa. Now, they also have, let's see here, Raw announced on WWE Raw Talk. Raw takes Lana. SmackDown takes Natalya. Raw takes Riddick Moss. SmackDown takes the Riot Squad. And Raw takes Arturo Ruas. Now, here's the problem with this, right? Let's talk about the real point here. The real point here is this. We see that last year's draft, people like Aleister Black, people like Humberto Carrillo, right? People like Murphy. These people were drafted in like the first or second rounds. Drew Gulak, all these people, right? And they accomplished absolutely nothing, right? And it's like, to me, I don't really understand why they keep doing this. Like, I can tell you they're going to accomplish nothing, you know? Like, Vince McMahon surely sees this, right? He's like, oh, Aleister Black, this guy will never be a star. Just look at him. He's never going to be a star. He's a sloppy-looking dude. Like, he's not intimidating at all. He's like a fat dude, basically. It's like when you watch New Japan, right? I was watching Wrestle Kingdom, like the last one or whatever, right? And me and my girlfriend were watching it because I was like, babe, I'm going to show you Japanese wrestling. It's cool, right? And she was like, okay, fine. And she watched it. Then Naito comes out. Now, keep in mind, Naito comes out at Wrestle Kingdom, right? In front of like the biggest crowd they'll ever draw, right? The most important event. And he comes out looking like skinny fat. Like he didn't even look like a cruiserweight. He looked like he was about 165 pounds of skinny fat. Like Naito needs to go to the gym. Some of these New Japan wrestlers need to go to the gym, man. Like some of them don't even work out. Like it's obvious. You look at them, you're like, this guy's never been to the gym in his entire life. Like, why is he a wrestler? This is ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? Naito is one of those guys. He comes out looking like he's just wearing a shirt. He takes it off. He looks like Matt Hardy from 2008. He has that same body, and he's supposed to be their number one star. Okada, same thing. He's a little bit better. He goes to the gym twice a week, maybe, right? But people like Tanahashi, right, who's like 43, he looks like $1 million. He's jacked, right? They have a few jacked ones too, but they got all these sloppy, skinny, fat guys, right? And it's the same thing in WWE with Aleister Black and Humberto Carrillo. Like nobody wants to see this garbage, right? And this brings me to the ultimate point. Last draft, right? Last draft, Andrade was drafted in the first round, in the same round that Brock Lesnar was drafted, right? And Zelina Vega came out, and I remember this. She said, Andrade was not drafted in the same round as Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar was drafted in the same round as Andrade, right? So they had big hopes for Andrade, I guess. But now, Andrade wasn't even drafted. He's one of like the 3 or 4 people who nobody even wants him, man. Like he went after, after round 7, we're talking about people like Arturo Ruas, who have never been on TV, right? People would rather have Arturo Ruas, Tozawa, Riddick Moss, right? And Titus O'Neil, also has never been on TV, right? And Aleister Black also fell to round 6. They'd rather have these guys than Andrade, who was like a relatively long-reigning U.S. champ. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was a big deal. So, think about that for a second. Think about what that means. I'll tell you what that means, motherfuckers. That means that, like, next year, right, expect some of these round 2, round 1 guys to go all the way down. all the way down. Like Lars Sullivan is a round 3 pick. Lars Sullivan will be in the supplemental draft next year. He will be drafted on WWE Raw Talk. Elias around 4. Elias will also be around 7 next year. That's what I'm saying. Like, you can predict these things so easily, you know? It's not even difficult. Like Bianca Belair, she will be drafted in like the same level as Natalia was drafted now, which was, I think, in the supplemental show. You know, these Angel Garza, he's lucky to even be with a company next year. You know, Murphy, Tucker, these guys, they're lucky to even be with a company next year, if you ask me, right? So that's what I'm getting at, motherfuckers. You need to have some sort of draft consistency, right? Especially with new groups like Retribution. Now, insofar as Retribution goes, I will say the following, right? I tuned in because I wanted to see Ali's message, right? I didn't see it. Like, I watched the show, I didn't see it, but I was watching it on DVR, so I'm like, oh, maybe I missed it, you know? So I went to WWE.com, trying to find information. And I just searched Mustafa Ali, or like Mustafa Ali Retribution on Google, right? And the article that I saw was like, it was like Mustafa Ali, like, response to not being seen on, on Raw, right? On not having a spot on Raw, you know what I mean? And I thought to myself, what the hell could he possibly have said about this, right? And I'll tell you what he said. He reacted to it, right? He put some stupid-ass picture on Twitter of himself with X's over his eyes and like a white line, like a white piece of tape basically, over his mouth. And it says here, Mustafa Ali / Adil Alam, which is his real name, I guess. It says, truth awaits no one but me. What the hell does that mean? Now, I click on this tweet, motherfucks, and I read some of the things that people say. Someone says, I can't wait for Retribution to be over. He says, I'll never be over, but finished. It's just horrible, basically, people are saying. And then someone says, you guys even show up on Raw. They give up on you, right? There's all these things that people are talking shit about Mustafa Ali because it's so stupid. It's so dumb, right? And then also, let's be real, motherfuckers. Let's be real. A lot of people are saying things like, Mustafa Ali, it's finally your time, right? Oh, like, you're going to get him this time, King. Right? For some reason, they keep calling him King, right? And I'm like, dude, nobody cares about this, right? It's like, think about what this means. Mustafa Ali, the leader of a renegade group, right? That's supposed to be a big threat to WWE. The leader of this group was supposed to explain why he did on Raw. And Vince McMahon was like, beat it, kid. Nobody wants you around, jobber. Get out of here, right? Now, logically speaking, the leader of such a group should take no advice from Vince. He should come out there, like, interrupt the match and then deliver it, right? Why didn't he, right? Why didn't they do it? They said they would, but they didn't. And now Mustafa Ali has to continue to embarrass himself with stupid-ass tweets like truth awaits no one but me. Stop being so mysterious and cryptic. It's not cool. First of all, it's been overly done by way better wrestlers than the jobber Mustafa Ali. Mustafa Ali sucks. He's one of the worst wrestlers they have. Let's be real, motherfuckers. This guy is garbage. He's not good at all. Like, he has like 3 moves. He has an imploding 450 like it's supposed to be good. He sucks. He shouldn't be leading anything. And WWE seems to have picked up on that, right? They probably looked at their roster and they saw Mansoor from Saudi Arabia and they were like, oh, we have Mansoor who looks exactly like Mustafa Ali. Let's put him in a better role and at least get some Saudi Arabian like reaction and money from it, right? Nobody cares about Mustafa Ali. Mustafa Ali leading a group is not interesting. This group, they already took Mercedes Martinez out of the group, right? Now it's Mia Yim with a mask. It's obviously her, right? It's a bunch of jobbers. They don't even show up on Raw. They don't even have room for them on Raw, man. Like, what the hell is the point of Retribution? The 3rd round picks. There's no, like, Bobby Roode and Dolph Ziggler had a match. Why didn't Retribution have a match? The only answer I can think of is that Mustafa Ali sucks. That's the only answer. This guy is just a generic jobber. Like, there's nothing about him that's interesting. You know, if it weren't for Retribution, the actual angle behind Retribution, Mustafa Ali would be drafted somewhere along the lines with like Tozawa, right? That's why people like Mustafa Ali and Cedric Alexander got lucky this draft. They are associated with entities that are bigger than them, and thus they get drafted pretty high up. Nobody wants to see Mustafa Ali. Nobody's ever said, man, I can't wait till Mustafa Ali comes back. Nobody gives a fuck. It would be like saying, I can't wait till Taka Michinoku comes back. It's like that's on the same level. No. It's actually worse because Taka Michinoku was entertaining and Funaki were entertaining. But if you were to take Mustafa Ali and compare him to like a wrestler from the, I don't know, late 90s, it would be like comparing him to S.A. Rios. Then, oh, I can't wait till S.A. Rios comes back from injury. No one cares, motherfuckers. No one cares. So that's what I gotta say about that. These videos running a little long, but it had to be said. It had to be said. This has jobber faction written all over it. Like, I honestly believe that it would be better for WWE to just retcon Retribution and turn them into like a comedy gimmick. Just make them the next three-man band, right? They're never going to be stars. None of them. As a matter of fact, the ones that have an opportunity to be stars, like Dio Madden and possibly Dijakovic, right? These people are being held back by this already. You know what I'm saying? These are people that actually would have had a chance. Now they will forever be known as the henchmen of Mustafa Ali. This is kind of like when the Ascension was ruined completely. They were already being ruined and jobbed out, but then they became the henchmen of Cody Rhodes. And you know it was a wrap from there. They were just seconds away from being released. They somehow kept their jobs for as long as they did. But that's what I'm saying. It was a wrap. And it's going to be the same thing for these people. I actually feel bad for them. I actually feel bad for the career of Dio Madden, right? Because he's never going to get a shot now. He is the lackey of Mustafa Ali. Mustafa Ali, 2 weeks ago, was feuding with like Davari, like, and not even the real Davari, like the inferior, younger Davari, you know what I'm saying? On like main event superstars or 205 Live or something, so nobody cares, all right? That's what I gotta say about that. See you motherfuckers later. Season 1, episode 1 in the books.